This episode is drunk.
Welcome everyone to another edition of Drunk Agile. As you can see, we just randomly start whenever we think it's ready. With me, as always, we have the always straight-faced Prateek Singh. Prateek, thank you for joining.
Hi, folks.
Well, I haven't seen Nisha yet tonight. Where's Nisha?
Yeah. There she is. There she is.
Hey, Nisha. Okay.
Passed out by the bar as usual.
She's she's assuming the Nisha pose. That's the yoga pose, the Nisha, yeah. the downward facing Nisha. Prateek, what are you drinking? Just very quickly, what are you drinking?
This is the Dalwhinnie Glenlivet. 10-year-old. It's 60.6%, and it's almost there. I feel sad. I feel sad.
Wait, I don't think I've tried that one. I don't think
you definitely tried it at Cadenheads. I don't know if you tried it on Surrey Road back or not.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm still working on my Blair Athel, so nothing new. If you want some notes on that, I think we did it in previous episodes. We don't need to waste time on that. Cheers, everybody. That was funny. Last week's episode with Chris, I think we got 40 minutes into the episode before we said cheers or something like that.
Yeah, I know. We're almost done.
Cheers, y'all. Okay, this episode is we didn't necessarily know it at the time, but is the second in a series of 3. The first of the series was our one on time boxing, which of course was brought to you by the word arbitrary.
Arbitrary.
I don't know if this one will be brought to you by a certain word. I'm sure we'll probably come up with something, but tonight we're going to be talking about let me going way too fast already. In that arbitrary episode, we talked about how we favor continual flow over time boxing, how there is rarely a case. And in fact, I think we set the challenge to people to show it, to tell us a case where time boxing is better than flow. Haven't heard anything. So we're going to take that as evidence that there's no evidence.
Either no one's listening to us or there's no evidence. We'll take the latter.
Absence of evidence is evidence of absence. In this episode, we are going to be talking about, actually, Prateek, I'm going to hand it off to you. What are we talking about tonight?
Yeah, today we're talking about how stable systems are better than spending a whole bunch of time planning. Like running a stable system, actively looking for stability is superior to planning your way to all the things we try to plan our way to.
Now okay, so that's a big statement. We favor stable systems over planning. That's I mean, there's a lot in there, so I think we need to spend just a little bit of time unpacking that. When we say stable system, because this is kind of a trigger for I think a lot of people. When we say stable systems, what do we mean?
There are at least 2 different definitions of stability that we will probably talk about here. Given by Walter Shewhart and the other given by Dr. Little. And again, unpacking the unpacking, there is so much to say about both of those definitions of stability. You cannot claim to have predictability without having stability as defined by these 2.
Okay. Just very quickly, can you just, or do you want me to, or
I'll do rock paper scissors. Well, I'll do one, you do the other. I'll do the Shewhart version because that's probably the shorter one.
Okay.
A stable system or a predictable system is one where there are no special causes, or everything is chance cause or common cause. There are no special or assignable causes. As things get through your system, there is nothing you can point to and say, hey, something happened there. We need to go and investigate that, while using Shewhart's methods, control charts, and all that stuff. That's Shewhart's definition of a stable or predictable system.
And if you to add on to that, if you read Wheeler, to confuse you even further, Wheeler will throw in terms like homogeneous or homogeneous. I'm not even sure what is the right way to pronounce that. I actually think it's homogeneous. Somebody out there, let us know. I'm pretty sure it's homogeneous, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure, but not sure. Wheeler will throw in terms like homogeneous, and he will throw in terms like predictable. And as far from the way that I read Wheeler, stable, homogeneous, predictable all mean the same things, just as exactly what Prateek said, absence of special cause. Right? The second definition is little. which if you've seen this series, you should be all of you should be able to tell us this right now. But this has to do with the assumptions behind Little's law, and making sure that you meet all of those assumptions, at least 4 of the 5 assumptions anyway, and maybe even more technically 2 or 3 of the 4. But all the assumptions of the throughput form of Little's law, as long as your process adheres to those, you are running a stable system. Now, it's important, I think, right now, right out of the gate, to point out that when we say stable, we do not mean not changing. That's not what we mean, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that everything is always exactly the same always. Both Shewhart and Little assume that there is variation in your process. So the problem isn't that there's variation. The problem is, well, when is variation too much, such that it violates the assumptions of Little's law and it violates the assumptions of Shewhart? I don't know. Were you going to say something about that?
No, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's the same thing that we for some reason got attached to the flow and the Kanban way of talking that we have, which is, oh, everything needs to be the same size, everything needs to take exactly the same amount of time. That is not what we're saying at all. In fact, this is the great thing about Shewhart, the way you draw and the way Wheeler talks about it. Dr. Wheeler talks about it is, as that variation increases, the way you understand it stays the same. Just the boundaries within which you understand it changes. So high variation system, you can still figure out when too much variation has happened. Low variation systems, you can still figure out where too much stuff has happened. So.
Yep. So yeah, so exactly right. So things like items moving through our system are of different size. Items take different amounts of times to complete. Maybe team members come and go. Maybe the amount of blockers that we have potentially changes over time. There are all these things that could be changing over time, but in and of themselves do not necessarily represent instability, right? So I think that hopefully that point is clear, because if you don't get that, you're probably not going to get the rest of everything that we're going to say tonight. But when we say stable, we don't mean it doesn't change or it doesn't vary over time. Anything more you want to say about that before we move on? Or
no, I think we've killed that dead horse.
Okay, good. Yeah. Just like we're about to kill that other whiskey. Okay, so that's what stability means. So why is that preferable over planning, or how is it preferable over planning, or however answer whatever question you want to answer?
Yeah, I wish we were doing visuals right now, because Dan showed me a great picture of how having a stable system means you stay within a certain bounds, and that's where things will stay. I'm sure Dan is looking for that picture right now.
Try and find it. Yeah, I'm going to try and find it. But as you can tell, we rehearse these, right?
But picture this: if you cannot stay within certain bounds, if your system is constantly jumping out of bound, and by definition that Shewhart would say is unstable, or by Little's definition, if your average age is consistently increasing, or the arrival rate is much greater than departure rate, any planning you do is moot. You're in an unstable system. However you try to predict that system, is just not going to work. So all the planning that you do is not going to work for you if you don't have a stable system.
I'm going to I only have a small version of this picture, so to help Prateek out, I am going to show this, and hopefully you can speak to this again in the context of what you just said. So 1 second while I fire up my screen sharing, if Zoom is going to let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so I think this is the picture that you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. It's really kind of small. It's the only thing I could find.
I'll read out what the text says. The text says, "What does it take to keep process outcomes in this window in the long term?" And that is written over a timeline where it says future. Now, just before that, it says past, and in that timeline, it shows the variability of that process. It shows how different things are taking different amounts of time, or we're getting different number of things done. Whatever that graph is for, whatever that data is, it's varying in a certain range. And to the right of it, there are two lines extending that say, can we keep that variation within this band? As long as we can, we're running a stable system. The reason we're talking about this picture, the reason we're talking about Shewhart's explanation of stability is because if you have things that are consistently going out of bounds, when you compare to their data in the past, you have absolutely no shot at being predictable. If you have no shot at being predictable, then all that planning that you're doing is complete waste. It's if you're planning for all these things to get done, there is no way that those plans will come true, because things keep going out of bounds all the time.
And it's worse than that, because you might think, well, okay, as long as our process is within those bounds, then it's okay to do planning, right? But the problem with that, or there's so many problems with that, but the problem that I'm going to pick on is most people, when they think about planning, they think about it in a deterministic fashion. Like we know exactly how long it's going to take this item to finish. We know exactly how many items, how many PBIs we can get done in this next sprint. We know exactly how many items we can get done, in the next quarter, whatever. And as both Little and Shewhart acknowledge, the whole idea of predictable is that not that everything takes exactly the same amount of time to get done. It's that just they vary within a consistent bounds, as Prateek said, they vary within. So once you have that, your process essentially does your planning for you. There is no point in going through each individual item and saying, oh, I think this one is this complexity, and I think this one's going to take this long. You don't really need to do that, because your process has essentially already done that for us. Now, we can do, things like Monte Carlo simulation and things like that embrace this idea of probabilistic forecast to start to quantify, what that risk might be. But to take the whole team offline for 8 hours every 2 weeks, or for, I don't know, how long does PI planning last in?
It's like 3 days. Is it 3 days?
Yeah, feels like 30. Yeah. To take the whole team offline to come up with this plan, when variation tells us the second you come up with that plan, it will be invalid.
Yeah. And it's even worse than that.
We're gonna one up each other all night here. Okay, keep going.
This is the third level of worse. Even if you can figure out, we're gonna get 7. We can say all 7.
That's the 9 circles of hell, right? Yeah. Dante was right.
Even if you can get a decent idea, you're running a predictable system, you can get a decent idea. Oh, we can get 50 things done. Great. You don't know what those 50 are going to be. You cannot plan what those 50, you can probably be pretty confident we'll get 50 things done. I'm 80% confident I get 50 things done, but you still don't know what those 50 are going to be. In fact, a week later, whatever your order of 50 was has probably changed already. You've got 20 new things that have shown up.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only do you, so here's the next level. Not only do you not know, but the thing is, you don't want to know. If we're truly talking about being agile, you don't want to know, right? Because you should be reacting just in time as you learn, as business conditions change, as whatever, right? There's no way we'd say we're going to get exactly these 30 items done in the next quarter, because I'm here to tell you, and everybody knows this. Anybody who's done a quarterly plan knows this, right? Something somewhere is going to change. It will. So
yeah, it's the next level of that. You're essentially assuming that you're not going to learn.
Yeah.
When you're sitting down and planning for any period of time, you're essentially assuming I am not going to learn anything new. So, and then the only way to make the plan come true is to just put the blinders on and go, I don't care what anyone's saying. I don't care what the customers are saying. I don't care what the market conditions are saying. I'm not learning anything new, and I'm just going with what I have.
So bringing this back to stability, if right now, think about how much you are investing in planning right now. Think about how many hours, how many people, how much money, whatever that investment is. Think about what that investment is. And what we're saying is that money, that time, that effort, that everything is much better spent in trying to make your system stable, according to Shewhart and Little, so that, like we said, it kind of takes all these other planning things off the table. Your process essentially does your planning for you. And we can quantify that risk within some acceptable bounds. We can quantify, hey, what might happen in the future based on our past, according to whatever risk we want to look at.
I don't think there's much more to add to that. I think we've done enough of this damage.
Okay. So I mean,
but
if you had to tie this up in a nice, neat little bow, what would you say? What's the action? What can people take away?
The action is invest energy into making your system stable so that you can actually answer the questions of, hey, this thing I'm working on, is it going to be done within the time that the customer expects it? Rather than spending time on planning out things that you haven't even started yet, or taking the energy of the entire team into that stuff. At the risk of increasing WIP, I will increase WIP. At the risk of adding something else on, what we're absolutely not saying, and I think we're going to hit this a lot harder in the next episode, is you don't try to understand what this thing is. People try to conflate estimation and planning with analysis. So that's not what we're saying. You have to understand what you're working on, but don't conflate that with analysis and planning. But what we're trying to say with estimation and planning, what we're trying to say is replace estimation and planning with things like stable systems, so you don't have to do it.
Well, since you increased WIP, I think I get to as well, because you bring up something that we talk about in our classes all the time. This idea that most people think the act of planning makes you predictable, right? But as I kind of alluded to before, but didn't really quite say what I wanted to, because I'm half a whiskey in, that think about what you're not doing while you're doing planning. What are you not doing? And the thing is, most people think you drive out uncertainty by talking about the work. And that's kind of what Prateek's talking about there. There's analysis that needs to be done, but you don't do analysis to drive out uncertainty. That's really not why you're doing analysis, right? So you don't drive out uncertainty by talking about it, by planning, by doing all that. In fact, what you're really doing is you're increasing your uncertainty, because all that time, all that effort that you spend in planning, that's effort that you're not spending actually doing. And you think it's making you better, but it's actually making you much, 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 much worse. And, unfortunately, pick your popular Agile framework, and they will tell you that planning is a necessary aspect of agility. Whereas I'm pretty sure if you go look at the Agile Manifesto, of course, everybody knows my thoughts on the Agile Manifesto, but if you go look at the Agile Manifesto, I'm pretty sure it doesn't say, do a whole bunch of upfront planning. I'm pretty sure it does not say that. I'll have to go check and make sure.
But what does it say, Dan? Which word does it use?
Continuous. I know that. I know it says continuous at least twice.
We will come back to this idea of continuous pretty soon in our next episode. We're gonna definitely come back to this idea of continuous, because you're probably sitting there going, hey, but we do planning. We do quarterly planning and then bi-weekly planning.
We have these guides that tell us that we have to.
Yeah. Well, if you guys are saying don't do it, well, what in the world should we do other than just run stable system? How do we answer these questions?
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of drop this bomb and then run away. But it's something I talk about a lot. I think I've said this before on this podcast. Somebody has to remind me. I know it sounded like we're wrapping up, but we weren't. If you look, and I am going to pick on Scrum. So hey, I'm used to I'm used to the hate mail. So bring it. But anybody who doesn't think that Scrum is rooted in deterministic project planning world, right? That's really where it came from, was a deterministic project planning world. If you look at the Scrum events, if you look at how the Scrum Guide outlines the Scrum events, for a 30-day sprint, and let's just talk about 30-day sprints, because that's really what the guidance is based on. For a 30-day sprint, it says you can have up to 8 hours for planning. That's the upfront planning stuff that we just said don't do, right? That it does you absolutely no good. The places where you learn, the events where you're actually learning, the sprint review and the sprint retrospective, You know, you get, I think, what is it? I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's 3 hours for the review and 4 hours for the retrospective, or vice versa, 4 hours for the review. Anyway, add those up. It's less than, you get less time to actually learn than you do to plan. And for me, that's one of the things about Scrum that is just completely unforgivable. That they actually say that in and of itself says that they value planning much more than they value review, when in my opinion, it should be the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Did I get the last word? Oh, but you're going to get the last word.
Well, I'll take it. And for those of you who want to know more about the other central aspect of Scrum, which is time boxing, watch our previous episode on arbitrary time boxes. And the reason planning exists in Scrum is because of the time box. What are we going to do over the next couple of weeks or the next 30 days? Yep. All these 3 episodes, the time box episode, this episode, and the next episode, are essentially all about how do you kill these deterministic thinking things by looking at variability and understanding variation, to quote Donald Wheeler, to understanding variation and making the process better.
Okay, so to give you a little hint about what we're going to talk about next time, a lot of you might be thinking, but wait a second. We've spent all this time coming up with this nice, neat, prioritized or ordered backlog. Don't we need to have a plan? We've got this backlog. Don't we need to have a plan to come up with how to handle all this great prioritization stuff that we've just done? And so just like this episode where we say don't do planning, spoiler alert, or not so spoiler alert, because we've talked about this a lot in the past, you really shouldn't be doing prioritization either. But that's for next time. So for Prateek, for Nisha, of course, Nisha, thank you for being with us. Thank you so much for
active participation,
for slumming it with the likes of us. I just want to say thanks to all of you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode. Good night, everyone.
Bye.